People's Liberation Army Navy.
An Australian warship visiting the Philippines.
Freedom of navigation is something the Philippines experiences.
As the Philippines, the US and France conduct joint Navy drills here off the coast of Palawan.
Imagine spending billions of dollars on modern warships, only to discover that your biggest weakness isn't at sea, it's back in port. That is exactly the challenge the Philippines is now trying to solve. The Philippine Navy is planning a modern naval support base in Misamis Oriental, not another missile base or frontline outpost, but a facility designed to keep an expanding fleet operational. Over the past decade, Manila has transformed its Navy with new frigates, offshore patrol vessels, corvettes, and plans for even more advanced capabilities under the Horizon Modernization program. But buying warships is only half the equation. Every vessel eventually needs fuel, maintenance, repairs, spare parts, and a place to return before it can sail again. Military leaders have long understood this reality. As General Omar Bradley famously said, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. In today's Indo-Pacific, naval competition is no longer defined only by who builds the most warships. Increasingly, it's about who can keep them at sea the longest. And that's exactly why the proposed support base in Misamis Oriental matters. For years, discussions about the Philippine Navy revolved around one question: how many new warships can the country afford to buy? Today, a more important question is emerging. Can the Philippines keep those warships at sea? That question matters, because the Philippine Navy is no longer the coastal force it was a decade ago. Through the Armed Forces of the Philippines Horizon Modernization programs, Manila has transformed its fleet. 2 Jose Rizal-class guided missile frigates now form the backbone of the Navy. More offshore patrol vessels are on the way, new corvettes are under construction, and defense planners continue to study the long-term acquisition of submarines under Horizon 3. Each new ship expands the Navy's capabilities, but every new ship also comes with an invisible commitment: decades of maintenance. A modern frigate requires constant support, from engine overhauls and radar maintenance to software updates, spare parts, fuel, and trained engineers. That cycle doesn't end after deployment. It continues throughout the ship's entire service life, often for 30 years or more. Here's what most people don't realize. A warship spends a significant part of its life in maintenance, not on patrol. The difference between an effective Navy and an overstretched one is often determined not by how many ships it owns, but by how quickly those ships can be repaired and returned to sea. As the fleet grows, so does the pressure on existing facilities. Infrastructure built for a smaller Navy can quickly become a bottleneck for a modern one. That's why Horizon 3, estimated at around $2 trillion, isn't just about buying more platforms. It's about building a force that can sustain them. Without matching investments in logistics, repair capacity, and support infrastructure, even the most advanced warships risk spending more time alongside the pier than safeguarding the country's waters. Other maritime nations learned this lesson years ago.
The WA and federal governments have signed a cooperation deal to establish the Henderson Defence Precinct, paving the way for a multi-billion-dollar upgrade to the shipyard.
Australia expanded Moss Sterling, Henderson Shipyard, and Osborne Naval Shipyard alongside its growing fleet. Recognizing a simple reality, ships alone do not create maritime power. Sustainment does.
To where we operate our nuclear-powered submarines. And so Henderson is the perfect spot.
The Philippines is now reaching the same conclusion. The challenge is no longer simply acquiring more warships, it's building the infrastructure to keep them operational. And that raises the next question. If the Philippines is investing in a new naval support base, why was Misamis Oriental chosen? The answer has less to do with available land and far more to do with geography, resilience, and the future of Philippine maritime strategy. So, what exactly is the Philippines planning to build in Misamis Oriental? If you're imagining another frontline military base filled with missile batteries and warships, think again. This is a naval support base, and that distinction is crucial. A combat base launches operations. A support base keeps them going. It's where ships are repaired, refueled, rearmed, and prepared for their next deployment. In many ways, it is the engine room of an entire fleet. According to Philippine Navy plans, the facility is expected to include a modern dockyard, maintenance workshops, fuel storage, logistics warehouses, engineering support, and repair facilities capable of servicing increasingly sophisticated naval systems. These may not sound like frontline capabilities, but they determine one critical outcome: how long a navy can stay at sea. A modern warship can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, but if it must travel hundreds of nautical miles for routine maintenance or wait weeks for critical spare parts, it becomes unavailable when it's needed most. In naval strategy, availability is capability. Every day a ship spends in maintenance is another day it isn't patrolling the country's exclusive economic zone, responding to emergencies, or training with allies. Other maritime nations learned this lesson long ago. Take Singapore. Despite operating one of Southeast Asia's smaller navies, it invested heavily in Changi Naval Base, building deep water berths, advanced repair facilities, and a world-class logistics hub. The goal wasn't simply to support ships, it was to return them to sea as quickly as possible. That investment has allowed the Republic of Singapore Navy to maintain a high operational tempo despite its relatively modest fleet. The Philippines now appears to be following the same path. The proposed support base in Misamis Oriental isn't meant to replace existing naval bases. It's designed to strengthen the foundation beneath the fleet, reducing maintenance bottlenecks, improving logistics, and increasing the number of mission-ready ships. But if sustainment is the goal, one question remains. Why was Misamis Oriental chosen over dozens of other coastal provinces? The answer isn't just about available land. It's about geography and how geography shapes strategy across the Indo-Pacific. So why was Misamis Oriental chosen? At first glance, it seems like an unlikely location. It isn't in the South China Sea, it doesn't face China's maritime claims, and it has never been one of the Philippines' traditional naval strongholds. But that's exactly what makes it valuable. Located on the northern coast of Mindanao, Misamis Oriental sits near several key maritime routes. From here, naval vessels can operate across the Bohol Sea, move south toward the Salib Sea, or transit through the Surigao Strait into the Philippine Sea and the wider Pacific. Rather than tying the fleet to one operational direction, the location offers flexibility across multiple theaters. That flexibility is becoming increasingly important. For decades, much of the Philippines' military infrastructure has been concentrated in Luzon. But modern defense planners know that concentrating critical facilities in one region also concentrates risk. A natural disaster, cyber attack, or military strike could disrupt naval operations far more easily if logistics are centralized. The solution is strategic dispersion. Instead of relying on a handful of major bases, the Philippines is gradually spreading key capabilities across the archipelago. A support base in Misamis Oriental would complement existing facilities in Luzon and the Visayas, creating a more resilient network. Think about it this way. If one naval facility becomes unavailable, maintenance, fuel, spare parts, and engineering support can shift elsewhere. Ships can be redirected, repaired, and returned to service much faster. In military planning, redundancy isn't waste, it's resilience. Japan has already embraced this approach. Over the past decade, Tokyo has expanded military infrastructure across Okinawa, Amami Oshima, Miyakojima, and Ishigaki, dispersing radar sites, logistics hubs, and missile units across its southwestern islands. The objective is simple: make its forces more survivable and harder to disable in the opening stages of a conflict. The Philippines isn't copying Japan's force structure, but it is recognizing the same strategic reality. A country spread across thousands of islands cannot rely on a single logistical center. That's why Misamis Oriental matters. It isn't simply another naval base. It's part of a broader shift toward a more resilient, more flexible, and more sustainable Philippine Navy. Because in the end, geography alone doesn't create maritime power. It takes the infrastructure to turn geography into strategy. A modern warship can carry advanced missiles, powerful radar, and a highly trained crew. But if it can't refuel, if it can't be repaired, or if it has to wait weeks for critical spare parts, none of that firepower matters. Because a warship that can't sail is no longer projecting power, it's sitting in port. That's why military planners care as much about logistics as they do about warships. Maintenance, fuel, engineering support, spare parts, and supply chains determine one simple thing: can the fleet stay at sea? During World War II, the United States didn't dominate the Pacific simply because it had more aircraft carriers. It built a logistics network that kept those carriers fighting. Floating dry docks repaired damaged ships near the front. Fleet oilers refueled task forces at sea. And forward bases like Guam, Ulithi, and Manus supplied fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and fresh crews. Those bases rarely made headlines, but they made victory possible. The same lesson is shaping naval strategy today. China isn't just building more destroyers and frigates. It's investing in shipyards, military ports, repair facilities, logistics hubs, and dual-use commercial ports that can sustain operations far from its shores. Beijing understands that building a fleet is only half the challenge. Keeping it operational is what creates lasting maritime power. The Philippines is beginning to recognize the same reality. New frigates, offshore patrol vessels, and future combatants strengthen the fleet. But without the infrastructure to maintain and resupply them, their potential will always be limited. Because in naval warfare, victory isn't always decided by who has more warships. Sometimes, it's decided by who can keep them sailing. If the proposed support base in Misamis Oriental is completed, its greatest contribution won't be measured by the number of ships it houses. It will be measured by how long those ships can stay at sea. That may sound like a small difference, but in maritime strategy, it changes everything. Through the comprehensive archipelagic defense concepts, the Philippines is shifting beyond coastal defense toward protecting an archipelago, safeguarding an exclusive economic zone of roughly 2.2 million square kilometers, and maintaining a credible presence across some of the world's busiest and most contested waters. That mission demands more than modern warships. It demands endurance. Every patrol in the West Philippine Sea, every sovereignty mission, humanitarian deployment, search and rescue operation, or joint exercise places additional strain on the fleet. The farther ships operate, the more important logistics become. A support base in northern Mindanao helps solve that problem. Instead of relying mainly on facilities in Luzon, the Philippine Navy would gain a more distributed support network, allowing ships to refuel, resupply, and undergo maintenance closer to their areas of operation. The result is simple: less time traveling for repairs, more time on patrol, and a stronger, more consistent naval presence. There is another advantage. Expanding domestic repair and logistics capacity reduces dependence on foreign facilities for major maintenance, giving Manila greater flexibility in sustaining its own fleet while continuing to work closely with allies. In other words, stronger infrastructure supports greater strategic autonomy. India offers a useful example. As the Indian Navy expanded into a true blue water force, New Delhi launched Project Seabird, transforming Karwar Naval Base into one of Asia's largest naval facilities. The goal wasn't simply to accommodate more ships, it was to sustain them for decades of operations across the Indian Ocean. The Philippines faces a different geography, but the lesson is the same. Modernizing the fleet also means modernizing the infrastructure behind it. Because maritime power isn't measured only by how many ships a country owns. It's measured by how often those ships are ready when they're needed most. And that raises one final question. If countries across the Indo-Pacific are investing not only in warships, but also in ports, shipyards, and logistics hubs, are we witnessing a new arms race, one built on infrastructure? For decades, naval power was easy to measure. Countries counted aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, and submarines. Whoever launched the most warships appeared to have the strongest navy. But today, military planners are watching something far less visible. Not the ships themselves, but the infrastructure behind them. Because a navy that cannot repair, refuel, or sustain its fleet will eventually lose its operational advantage no matter how advanced its warships may be. That is why a quiet transformation is taking place across the Indo-Pacific. Countries are investing not only in new fleets, but also in shipyards, dockyards, military ports, repair facilities, logistics hubs, and industrial capacity. China has expanded its shipbuilding industry and logistics network alongside the world's largest navy. Japan is strengthening infrastructure across its southwestern islands. India continues expanding Karwar Naval Base. Australia is investing in Moss Sterling, Henderson Shipyard, and Osborne Naval Shipyard. Singapore has built one of Southeast Asia's most advanced naval support hubs at Changi Naval Base. Different countries, different strategies. The same conclusion. Modern naval power depends as much on infrastructure as it does on warships. The Philippines is now moving in the same direction. Its modernization is no longer measured only by new frigates or future combat platforms, but by the infrastructure needed to keep those ships operational across one of the world's largest archipelagic maritime domains. That represents a fundamental shift. In the past, analysts asked, how many ships does a country have? Tomorrow, they may ask, how many of those ships are ready to sail? Because there is a difference between owning a fleet and sustaining one. And in the Indo-Pacific, that difference may define the next generation of maritime power. At the start of this video, we asked why the Philippines is investing in another naval base. The answer is simple. This isn't just about building another military facility. It's about building the infrastructure that keeps a modern navy operating. For years, Philippine modernization focused on acquiring new warships. But as the fleet grows, maintenance, logistics, repair, and sustainment become just as important as the ships themselves. The world's leading naval powers from the United States and Japan to India, Singapore, and China have all learned the same lesson. Sea power isn't measured only by the ships you build. It's measured by how many you can keep at sea. That is why the proposed support base in Misamis Oriental matters. It strengthens the foundation for a more capable, resilient, and self-reliant Philippine Navy. Because in the end, the future of maritime power won't belong only to those who build the biggest fleets.